guys, the Super Review Show here for another episode of Rock Talk. It's been about a month or two since I've done one of these, but I have been super busy, but I'm back. Here we go. Today's Rock Talk episode is celebrating, I believe it was back in October, that this album turned 35. Truthfully, it is one of my favorite albums of him, of this artist, and I'm going to get into why in a little bit, but basically, today we're talking about, as the title of this video suggests, we're talking about Bruce Springsteen's Tunnel of Love, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's not Valentine's Day, I know it's not anything like that, but this is an album that kind of was very underappreciated when it came out a little bit to some extent by certain members of his fan group. There's Bruce Springsteen, Tunnel of Love, and this album, this was the follow-up to Born in the USA. So for those of you who live under a rock and don't know who I'm talking about when they say Born in the USA or Dancing in the Dark, two of the biggest hit singles of the 80s in general, I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen. One of my, and I've gone on tangents before, I'm going to make it very short. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. I have a deep respect for him. I love a lot. I love a very good majority of his work. There's certain things I didn't like. There's a lot of things I did like over the course of his career, but this is a pinnacle, a very high note portion of his career that I love this album that much. So, off the heels of Born in the USA, big hits, huge Bruce mania. It's like the mid-'80s. This comes out in 1987. And it's funny. He wanted to make an album that was a lot smaller and focus on different stuff, but in a smaller setting. Because Born in the USA was so big. Like songs like Darlington County, or songs like I'm on Fire, or songs like Dancing in the Dark or Glory Days. These are just huge songs and staples on the Born in the USA tour. Excuse me. Little burp there. Forgive me. Anyways, basically, he wanted to make an album, and it's all him. It's just him on the instruments and just him. So he did all the drums, he did the keyboards, he did the harmonica, he did the guitar, he did everything, and it was him and one other guy in his garage in his house making this record, and it is one of the most underappreciated albums of the 80s. Because when people think about Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, they typically think about like Born in the USA, Born to Run, maybe The River, with Sherry Darling and Hungry Heart, stuff like that. But a lot of people say his first seven albums, and I understand that. Your opinion is no more valid than mine, ladies and gentlemen. I personally say his first 8. This is his 8th album that he ever put out. A lot of people kind of wrote it off at the time, like, oh, he's going in that direction. He's writing about relationships. And truthfully, if you are, this might sound pathetic. I talked about this when I did my video of why you should listen to Bruce Springsteen, the issue band from the get-go. But on this album in particular, now that it's been 35 years since 1987, the messages in the songs still hold up. They still hold up to this day. A lot of the songs, if not all of them, even the big hit singles, Brilliant in Disguise, Tougher Than the Rest, even the big chart hit at the time, One Step Up, these are all pretty big songs at the time. People are like, oh wait, why is Bruce going in this direction? And let me not shy away from this. There are recordings of this tour, the Tunnel of Love Express tour, on his live website. You can check it out there, where it's basically him just. It's basically, long story short, he has a website where he releases live albums, not live albums, live shows. And they play them on E Street Radio. They play them. You can buy them. They're like $10, I think, each now or whatever. It's pretty cool. And how they have a lot from the Tunnel of Love Express tour, 1988 and 1989. And I listened to a lot of. I haven't bought any of them, but I've listened to some of the samples and stuff. The band was on fire then. I would almost say they were almost more on fire than the Born in the USA tour. And also, it was the last tour. This album was the last tour that Bruce was doing intermissions between the sets on stage. There was a main set 1, set 2, and then there was an encore of an acoustic Born to Run. Very interesting stuff to mention that. I know I'm talking about the tour and stuff like that, but this album has a lot of meaning to me personally. But back to the album though. The album itself, if you are one of these people who are like, oh, I'm a big sucker for love songs, I'm a big sucker for songs with meaning. I'm a big fan of songs with a lot of depth and complexity to them, and different meaning and lyrically and stuff like that. And this is an album, and if you have not checked out this album, check out Tunnel of Love. And I know that some people are like, oh, well, how could you like only songs with like just messages in it? My opinion is no more valid than yours there, my dear friend who's complaining to me. This is a really solid album with a lot of messages on how to live your life in a certain way. And because at the time, Bruce was married to an actress. Her name was Julianne Phillips, if I'm not mistaken. She was a big actress at the time. He got married. He was married to her for about 2 or 3 years, and then they got divorced. He was married to her from 85 to during the making of this album. And he made this, I look at it personally, so he made this album in response to how he felt about his time with her and how his relationships and struggling and all this other stuff. And then he realized that he loved Patty. Patty is his current wife of 35 something years, maybe a little bit more, who knows. But this album, when you want to talk about complexity in albums, you want to talk about some of the best lyric writing of his career, it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, a lot of people say like Nebraska. I would say Tunnel of Love is better than Nebraska, truthfully. I'm one of those people. I'm a big Tunnel of Love fan. The title track, of course, songs like Brilliant Disguise, Tougher Than the Rest, One Step Up is a haunting song. One Step Up, the Kenny Chesney actually covered it, believe it or not. The country singer, he covered it. So, anyways, here's the track listing for Valentine's Day, for Tunnel of Love. Here we go. Side 1, Ain't Got You. Tougher Than the Rest. All That Heaven Will Allow. Square Parts. Cautious Man. Walk Like a Man. Side 2, Tunnel of Love. Two Faces. Brilliant Disguise. One Step Up. When You're Alone. And Valentine's Day. This album was on the greatest. When people say what are Bruce Springsteen's best albums, I put this up there. Just listen to his first 8 albums. I don't say 7. I say 8. This is number 8. Because when you talk about songs that are still to this day relevant, still to this day complex, still to this day giving men and women advice on how to be, in a relationship, it might sound like cheesy, it might sound lame, it might not be your thing, but at least give it a shot. Because what kills me is that when I say, hey, just check out this album by this artist. If you've seen my show, you know me for a long time. I'm a big fan of a lot of these older artists who have newer stuff coming out. I'm a big fan of stuff like that. Obviously, he's just put out a new album this week in November. But it's one thing to critique something and without listening to it, and that just is annoying to me. Don't critique something. You don't have an opinion if you didn't listen to it, or you didn't watch it, or you didn't see it. Or that's how art works. You have to at least look at it, or acknowledge it, or watch it, or see it, or listen to it to enjoy and give an opinion of it. You can't just be like, oh, I didn't. Then you can't really tell an opinion. But with this album, it is a great album. It gives a lot of insight into where he was in his lifetime at the time. It gives a lot of insight on how his overall feelings were towards Julianne Phillips, towards Patty. Patty joined the band in Born in the USA. She joined the East Street Band in 1984, and they were on stage and stuff like that for certain songs, and that might have. I mean, no one knows for sure, but they might have upset Julianne Phillips, or I'm not sure. So it all depends on who you were and what you think. You know what I mean? But just going back to the album. The album has a lot of in-depth songs on it, and I feel like to the average going listener, this might be a little bit, truthfully, disclaimer, this might be a little bit much for you. As like it's just a Bruce Springsteen album. No one really cares about it. No. Honestly, if you want my truthful opinion, which I always will give you my opinion, but this album, you gotta listen to it when you're by yourself, and just put on your Spotify TV, or put on your phone or whatever, or on a train ride or a car ride, whatever, and just listen to the album from start to finish, and you might actually gain a different perspective on how relationships work, on how love can be interpreted. Like, it's a very, very, very tons of messages, tons of messages in this album. It's crazy. And as far as his career goes, it's kind of getting overlooked a lot. But I think it's a masterpiece. It was mixed by Bob Claremountain. He produced it himself. And it just, Toby Scott was the guy who recorded and engineered it. I'm literally reading off there. That's okay. But bottom line, Tunnel of Love is one of these albums that there's really nothing else like it. I would say it's a super album because it still debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It sold tons of records because it came off the heels of Born in the USA, and he never really went back to that superstardom level, unless it was like The Rising or Wrecking Ball or stuff like that. But this album in particular is a really solid record. It has tons of messages. If you're into stuff like that, like into interpreting song lyrics and not just like, oh, this song is good or bad or whatever, or it hits me hard, it hits me, doesn't hit me hard. This is a good album to get into and to understand his thinking, his thought process as you listen to it. So, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode of Rock Talk. Overall, listen to Tunnel of Love. It is a fantastic record. Truly one of his best, honestly. One of his best records. I don't understand why some people are like, oh, he's talking about relationships now, no one really cares. But if you really listen to it and break down the words, break down the songs, if you're looking for an album to dissect, this is one to dissect. The lyrics, the sound, it still sounds very 80s synth-ish on like Walk Like a Man and When You're Alone and Valentine's Day. These are all songs that still sound very 80s synth-ish, but they all hold up really well, truthfully. But yeah. Anyways, that's going to do it for us here at the Super Show. But what do you think? Are you a fan of Tunnel of Love? Tunnel of Love community of Bruce Springsteen fan groups. Jump down in the comment section below. Share your thoughts on this video and share your thoughts on Tunnel of Love in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow us on our social media platforms. But for all of your Rock Talk episodes and many more, keep it locked on the Super Review Show. The J-Man is off to rock. We'll see you guys later.